Okay, today I'm going to be showing you how to install the Golem 0.8 Alpha on macOS Sierra. The instructions should work exactly the same for previous versions of macOS as well, but they won't work on the current beta preview of macOS High Sierra because Homebrew is not currently working on High Sierra. So I'm starting with a fresh install of macOS Sierra here, actually running it in a VM. So I'm not assuming anything is pre-installed for you, so this should get you completely set up on Mac from scratch. To begin with, we will jump down to Safari and go to the Golem homepage, which is golem.network. Now at this point I'll say if you aren't really familiar with what Golem is or what it's trying to achieve, there's not much point continuing on with this video. You should stop the video, jump onto golem.network and have a read of the white paper and all the other resources available from there. But for now we'll head to the alpha section, scroll down a bit, hit further instructions, and this will take us to Golem's GitHub page where there's instructions for installing on Linux and Windows as well. But if we scroll down a bit, we will get the instructions for macOS. Now the instructions here assume you already have Homebrew installed, because we don't, the full instructions are available at this link here, the official GitHub repository for the Mac version, because it's slightly different. Scroll down again, and we've got the requirements listed here, as well as more detailed instructions. So I'm going to open this Homebrew link in a new tab. Homebrew is a package manager for macOS. It's quite useful, and that's what Golem uses for installing on macOS at the moment. So we're going to copy this line here, open terminal. If you're not familiar with terminal, the easiest way to open it is hit Command Space to bring up Spotlight Search, start typing in terminal, and then hit enter to open it. Paste in that command, and this will begin installing Homebrew for us. So it advises us what it's going to install and create, so press return, and it needs administrator permissions, so it needs your password, and you should be an admin account to do this. One of the things it's going to install is the Xcode command line tools. So this can take a little bit of time depending on your network connection, your speed of your computer, and so on. There'll be a few times through this video where I may actually pause the video or cut the video together so that you're not sitting waiting. Okay, so it's now installing Homebrew itself. So this shouldn't take too long now. And there we go. So Homebrew is installed. So now we can go ahead and install Golem. So we can close this tab back in Safari and continue on with these instructions. Basically, you want to copy them one line at a time and paste them into terminal. Is the easiest way to do it. Now, what we've done is we've tapped castroom/cask, and we're going to tap Golem factory/Golem. These are kind of like repositories, I guess. So these usually happen pretty quickly, and then the actual install happens with the install command. And Homebrew will automatically take care of all of the dependencies as long as it can find them in one of the taps you've tapped. So that's why we had to tap Cask Room as well. Now it's going to need admin permissions to do this, so we need to enter the admin password again. This is going to go ahead and download not just the Golem installer, but all the dependencies it relies on as well. So this may take a little bit of time to go through and install. Now, you may notice with the Docker machine driver Xive, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, it gives you some instructions saying it requires super user privileges, and we'll get those instructions again right at the end, and they are also listed in the install instructions. So we do need to run those commands so that the driver can actually run properly. And now it's downloading the actual Golem installer now that it's done all of the prerequisites. And there we go, Golem is installed. And you can see that last line before saying it's successfully installed, that it's moved it to /applications/golem.app. So we can actually exit out of terminal now that it's installed. And we can actually run it. So we could go to applications and open it from there, or we can just hit Command Space again and start typing Golem. Now before I do that, I did forget to run these two commands. So we should run these. So I'll open terminal back up. That's the first command, and the second one. This is just giving that particular driver file the permissions it needs so it can run properly. And there we go. Now we can quit that. Okay, I'm going to minimize Safari for now. And we can run Golem. Now, it's important that you don't just click through here too quickly. Some key things to note. Firstly, it says, please make sure that your computer has public IP or forwarded ports 40102, 40103, and 3282. Get more info here. So at this point, if you haven't already set up port forwarding, or you don't have a public IP, so you need one or the other, So if you've got a public IP and you don't have a firewall, or you've opened those ports in your firewall, you should be fine. Otherwise, if you don't have a public IP, and if you don't know, then you probably don't have a public IP, you'll need to set up port forwarding in your router. So you can click for more info here, and it's this section here. Need to port forward these 3 ports, and there's instructions on how you'll generally do that on this website, which is for Bitcoin. Follow the same kind of instructions. You need to scroll down to the port forwarding section, and it'll give you some instructions, but remember, it's different ports to what's on these instructions. It's the ports listed back here or in the Golem app. The easiest way to check is if you go canuseeme.org. There's a couple of different sites that do the same thing. This is the one I use. And you basically want to go through the 3 ports one by one and check that they're open. So 3282, check port, and it should say success. If it says something other than success, so I'll just show you with the port we're not using. It'll take a little bit longer because it's trying to get through. If you get this red error on 3282, 40102 or 40103, then you need to resolve that because Golem's not going to run properly. So 3282 was fine, so we'll just check the other 2, 40102 is fine, and 40103. Great, so all our ports are fine, so we know that's going to be fine for us. Now, if we minimize that, jump back in, so we can continue on now. Now, here you can leave it as anonymous, but I'd recommend entering a node name here. You can't at the moment come back and change this, so you need to do it at this point before you continue on. So I'm going to call this Golem macOS demo, and this will just allow us to double check that it can be seen and that it's working a bit easier. I'll show you that in a little bit. We can continue on. So it's just giving a bit of info about the 2 main tabs, the network tab and the tasks tab, and how they work. And now we can get started. Okay, great. So you can see it's already connected to a bunch of nodes here. What you can't really tell from this screen is that it's actually syncing the blockchain at the moment. Now, once it's fully synced, it will give us 1000 GNT. This is test GNT, I should say, purely for testing the alpha. So this is not the GNT that you can buy on exchanges or that you may have got at crowdfunding. This is purely testnet GNT for testing the alpha. It has no real world value. So once it's fully synced, that balance will go up from 0 to 1000. Just quickly point out as well, there is still a bug in the interface here. It loads with what appears to be the tasks tab selected, but it's actually showing the network tab. So if we click on network, now we're on the network tab. The tasks tab should look like this. Now I'll show you as well how we can see that it's still syncing the blockchain, because it looks like it's doing nothing. You can just leave it for a while and come back, and that's absolutely fine. But if you really want to have a bit more of an idea of what's happening, there's a way to do that. So if we just open a new Finder window, hit Command-Shift-G, which is the shortcut to open a specific location, type it /library. You can hit Tab for autocomplete. Library, application support, Golem, default, Ethereum, Rinkaby, which is the name of the testnet, Geth, and light chain data. There we go, so we can see these numbers are increasing. It's creating new local database files, which contains the actual blockchain. Now, if you're only interested in being a provider, so that means you're providing your CPU so that you can earn GNT, then at this stage you can simply just leave Golem running in the background. It'll eventually be fully synced, and then it'll start accepting tasks when they're available. But if you want to submit tasks, which if you're testing the alpha I'd recommend, then obviously you need to wait for it to fully sync, and then we can add some tasks and submit them to the network. I believe we can actually submit them now before it's even synced, but we're going to wait till it's fully synced and we can see our balance and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that for a while and come back in a while once it's fully synced. Okay, so you can now see that we've got the 1000 GNT showing in the balance. And so we know that the blockchain has now synced. If we click on this little ETH as well, it should show we've got a small amount of ETH as well just to handle the transactions, I think. So there you go, 0.03 ETH. So we will actually begin to get some tasks in theory. If I jump into history, there's nothing showing yet. Now we should already be running, even though it says start Golem below, to generate some. One thing I haven't showed you yet, this advanced tab. This is where you set the settings for how much CPU, RAM and disk space you're willing to allocate to Golem. So it will give you an initial amount. To actually change it, a lot of people don't realize you have to actually hit stop Golem first. I'm just going to close this, we don't need that anymore. You have to hit stop Golem to allow you to actually edit these settings. So CPU, it's showing 1 is the maximum. The reason is, if I go to about this Mac, because it's a VM, I created the VM with 2 processors, 4 gig of RAM, and can't remember, just over 40 gigs hard drive. So Golem will always leave 1 CPU purely for the operating system so that it doesn't hang or crash your computer. So because I've got 2 cores according to the VM, it's saying I can only use 1. If you had it running on something with more cores, say you had 4 cores, you could obviously set it 1 to 3. RAM, it's using basically all the RAM it's willing to, so I could drop that. I could change that to 2048, and that's because I think it was 4 gig of RAM, did I say? Yeah, so it's letting me use about 3 gig as the max again, so that it doesn't overload the system. And I've got plenty of disk space, so let's ramp that up as well. And then I can start Golem again. It should show you this resources. You can actually, if you want, just adjust this slider, and that will handle that for you. But I like to set it myself. Oops. Restart it. Now each time you stop and start Golem, obviously it has to do node discovery again, so now you can see I'm only connected to 2 nodes where I was connected to 9 or 10 before I disconnected. So this will eventually increase as it discovers nodes that it's able to connect to on the network. Okay, so now we're connected to 9 nodes again. So what I'm going to do is show you how to submit a task. Now, if you have your own Blender tasks, you can go ahead and submit one of them that you actually want rendered, but I would recommend just for your very first task, start with a very small demo task. And I've actually created one that you can use yourself. So if you go to golem.timjones.id.au, I've just created a little website with a bunch of demo files that you can use. So the one we're going to use is the Golem logo demo fast. There are 2 others that I just created for fun and to kind of test out the capabilities, I guess, of the network and how everything works. Down the bottom, if you do find these useful, feel free to give me a small donation. Not necessary, you can use any of it for free, but if you do wish to donate something to me, that would be greatly appreciated also. But yeah, so I recommend starting with this Golem logo demo fast. It's only an 80 kilobyte file. Click to download it. And that's a .blend file. So if you had Blender installed, you could open it and render it locally as well. Obviously, this is a fresh macOS installation, so Blender is not on it, which does not matter because we're going to render it using the Golem network. So if we bring back up Golem, click on the Tasks tab. Now you can click the plus to add it, or you can simply drag the file across, give it a name. We'll call it logo test 1. It's automatically detected that it's a Blender file, so we can click next. Now that little rendering and success is just rendering a tiny portion of the file to make sure that it's actually a valid file and it's going to work. We don't have any presets saved, so you can leave that. Need to give it some dimensions. So I can't remember the settings for this. It shouldn't matter too much. I can't remember what ratio is best. But we can go with, say, 1024 by 768. Will hopefully work. Frame range, I believe, should just be 1 or 1 to 1. It's a PNG file that we want. You can also choose an EXR file, but we want PNG. Output 2, just the local documents folder is fine, or you can change it if you want. We're not using compositing. You can save presets if you're doing the same settings over and over. Task timeout. Now this is where people initially think, well, Golem's designed to render things quickly and efficiently. I'm going to set a really small timeout. There's a few reasons you don't want to do that. First of all, on the alpha testnet, of course, there's not that many nodes and things are still not perfect. So you actually want to set a high task timeout. And additionally, it's not like it's always going to take the maximum time. So even if it does render quickly, it's still worth setting a fairly high task timeout just to make sure that it succeeds. So I'm going to set it to 18 hours. Subtask amount, that's the number of slices that it will slice the rendering into. So I'll use 8. You can see it has a suggested 8 there. I'm not sure if that suggestion is dynamic, but I'm just going to put 8 in anyway. And the subtask timeout, so how long before it times out for any particular subtask. Now, you could set it to the full 18 hours of the full task. You could set it to however slow you want. I'm just going to pick, for no particular reason, 12 hours for the subtask timeout. I'm hoping it happens a lot quicker than that, but I'm going to set it reasonably high because I don't know what the current state of nodes on the alpha network is. While we're on that, I'll just show you another useful page, which is stats.golem.network. And this shows you all the active nodes on the network. And you can see right here, the name is a bit long, so it's cutting off the version number, but this is our node, Golem macOS demo version 0.8.0. So, because the screen size is a bit small, it's a bit hard to see, but there is a little green dot to the right that's showing that we are connected, and last seen keeps refreshing because it's being seen constantly. So if you're having network issues, you're not sure if you're connected properly, it's worth going to this page and making sure you can be seen on here. And again, this is why it's important to actually set a node name, because otherwise you'll just come up as undefined, and of course you won't be able to tell which undefined you are. So there's a whole lot on the network at the moment, but we're still going to leave the task times fairly short. Estimated price. Now because I've got 1000 GNT, I'm not really that tight. I'm going to set a bid of 10 GNT per hour, and it's estimating how much it might cost me, nearly the full 1000. Obviously, if you're doing this with real GNT, you wouldn't set it so high. But I'm going to set it so high just because I want to make sure it's accepted. In your settings, you can actually, which I'll show you in a second, you can actually set what your minimums and maximums and so are for prices that you will accept on the network. So that's all the settings I need, so I'm going to go ahead and click Start Task. And in a second, this should start. Preparing, waiting, and it's preparing for computation. Now, it may actually stay on this for quite a while, so don't freak out if it stays on this for a while, because I believe when it says waiting, it's looking for nodes, it's sending it, and I'm not sure where the current status of the alpha is. I know certainly in 0.7.0, it wouldn't give you feedback on how far in a subtask was until that subtask was completed. Now it looks like it's actually happening quite quickly here, which is great. I'm not sure if it'll show me slices. Doesn't look like it. But it's happening very fast, which is what we wanted to see. And this is why, again, I recommended using that simple task for your first task, because it really is a very basic blend. If you ran it on your local computer, it wouldn't take long at all. You wouldn't bother in reality processing it on the Golem network, which is why it's perfect just for testing that your setup is working properly. So I'm going to leave that running for now, and hopefully it will be done very soon. And it looks like it's taking a little while at this point. One thing I did remember is I think this toggle is the preview toggle. Yes, so if we turn that on, it should show us. That's not quite right. So usually it would show us how much of the task was complete. So maybe none of it's actually come back complete yet. So we'll leave that running like that. And another thing I did just remember of why you might actually want to set a slightly shorter subtask timeout. Setting a long full task timeout is good. You may want to set your subtask timeouts shorter, just in case parts of your task, so some of your subtasks, get sent to a node that is having issues or can't actually get it back in time. You don't want it to sit for hours and hours trying to do that particular subtask before it fails. Hopefully that won't happen to us though. So we'll leave it again for a while and see what happens. Okay, it doesn't seem to be progressing very much from this point. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to stop this particular task and create a new one with some different settings and see how we go. I'm going to delete that. Actually, that's interesting. So that's showing how much of it's actually been completed now that it's refreshed. Looks like there's a bit of a bug there at the moment with it not showing the preview until I hit that delete button and go to delete it. But you can see there that a third of it is 3 of the 6 pieces have successfully rendered and we're waiting on the other 3. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cancel that and resubmit it with still quite a long task timeout but a much shorter subtask timeout. So we've killed that task, although it's still showing in the preview and it's still showing the processing part at the moment. That's better. So that looks like it might be another bug with the 0.8 alpha. And as I've said, it is an alpha, so do expect that there will be things that aren't working perfectly. That's part of the reason the alpha is out there, for people to test it and find things that do need fixing. And a lot of this the team will already know still needs to be fixed, but it's worth raising it in the Golem Slack or on their GitHub just to make sure it is something they're aware of. Before we submit a new task, I'll just show you the settings as well. So if you go to the settings, it's showing the node name and the ID. Performance, it's showing the performance. Now that's interesting, it's got a 0 performance for Blender, so we might run calculate and just see. It'll do some basic tasks in the background to work out the estimated performance of this particular machine. It'll take a little bit of time to calculate and then it should come back with a result soon. And there we go, it's updated the calculations for the performance of this machine, which as you can see is not that amazing, but that's not surprising because it's just a VM that I've created with limited resources. And this is what Golem uses for doing its estimations of cost and how long things will take and so on. We've got the price settings here as well. So you've got provide a minimum and request a maximum. So as long as someone's bidding at least 0.5 GNT per hour, I'm going to be up for receiving that task. If they bid below that, then my node just won't accept their tasks. Request a maximum. I'm not 100% sure what that does because obviously I can bid above that, so I'm not particularly sure what that does at this point. But generally, at least for the alpha for testing, you can just leave them as the defaults anyway. And network trust, you can set trust levels, but for now I'd just leave it as the default, which is 0 and 0. And of course the default file location of where it's going to output, which is in documents for the Mac. So we'll go back to tasks. We'll put the preview pane on from the beginning, in this case. Drag that file across to create it again. I'm going to call it Golem Logo 2. Can't remember exactly what we called the first run. I'll use the same dimensions. 1:1 for the frame range. I'll set a shorter task timeout just to see how it goes. I'll set the task timeout to 4 hours. Subtask amount, I'm going to set it to 8 again. That's interesting because I think it actually split it to 6 even though we set it to 8 last time. So we'll see what it does this time. And the subtask timeout, I'm going to set it quite short because if it doesn't succeed after 5 minutes, I want it to go on and try on another node for that particular subtask. We'll do a bid of 2 GNT per hour, and you can see it's much cheaper because we've set the timeouts a lot lower. And so we can start this task. And hopefully this time it will complete a lot quicker for us. So we can see it's already done some of the task. I'm just going to hit this to see how much. And that looks like a reasonable amount of the image so far. Okay, so we can see 3 of those tasks just went from green to red. What that is telling us is that those tasks failed for some reason. I would almost guarantee it's that they timed out for whatever reason. Now what should happen is that those subtasks get resubmitted to the network and will hopefully go to another node that will successfully render them. So we'll see what happens. So you can see they've gone back to green, so that should tell us that they've gone to other nodes who will hopefully complete them soon. Now in the previous GUI there used to be a way to look at who had received the task and what status it was in. I'm not sure if we can do that in the current release. It doesn't look like we can. Okay, so it's looking a little better, nearly done. Looks like there's one subtask left before it's completed. So hopefully that will come through soon. Okay, and that is now complete, and you can see the time it's taken to complete there. So if we go to the output folder, we should see the completed file. And that's all there is to it. And that's how to install and use the Golem Alpha on macOS. So the next video I do will be how to install and run the Golem Alpha on a Windows device. So subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to see that.